Hey, what's going on, people? So, I want to talk a little bit more about this moon landing or not an actual moon landing. I don't even know what to call it. The moon landing hoax. I don't even know what to call it. But it didn't happen. It's mathematically impossible. It's scientifically impossible. It's physically impossible. It didn't happen. Okay? Um, it's the lie that lives on today, 50 years later. It's the lie that lives, not the actual event, but the belief that it happened. I hear people say they saw it on TV, they saw it on TV, so it has to be real. And I was actually curious about that, so I went and looked and was like, how many people actually saw this on television in 1969? And I went and looked, and at the time in the United States, there were only about 200 million people, and at the time, about 40 million of them had televisions. Um, what? That means 1 in 5 homes had a television in 1969. 1 in 5. That means 80% of people didn't even have a television in their home to see this. So they didn't even see it. People didn't even see it. They just heard about it. They just read about it. But they believe it. You know? People say they don't, they're not religious, they don't believe in God, or they believe in a Bible because it was man-made and man-written. Do you not think man made that film? Do you not think man wrote that newspaper? Where do you think this information's coming from? So you don't believe the Bible, but you believe the newspaper. And what kind of logic is that? Okay, I don't want to get all spiritual, but yeah, so that's what we're talking about here. People are saying they saw it on television. It must be true. It must be real. I mean, 80% of people didn't even have a television in their home. And you're trying to tell me that we had the technology to make a 500,000-mile round trip in space. Come on. Pull your head out. Think about it for a second. It's an impossibility. Okay? So I don't know why that's bugging me today, but it's an impossibility. It didn't happen. And the thing about it that drives me nuts is that the deception lives on today. We're over 50 years into this thing. The deception lives on today. And at some point, what gets to me the most is at some point they knew they couldn't make it. And I don't know at what point. I don't know if this was in the 50s and they started pretending, or if this was somewhere in the 60s after Kennedy made his speech, they realized they couldn't make it, and they started pretending. At some point they started pretending. They had to, because they knew they couldn't make it. So that decision is the linchpin. That's what matters to me, is when that decision was made and who made that decision. Because somewhere behind closed doors, a group of people got together and they made a decision. They made a choice. They chose deception. They had two options. We're either gonna make it to the moon. We're gonna take all this money and come up with the technology to make it to the moon. But they couldn't do that. So they had to choose option B, which is take all this money and fake it. That's really all there is to it. They realized they couldn't get there, so they started taking this money and they started coming up with ways to fake it. And you can't go both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't have the funds and the time and the means to build the technology and do the research and do the development to get there while you're spending time and money and research and training faking it. You can't do both. You can't do both. So which one were they doing? Were they building the technology to get there, or were they building the technology to fake it? They couldn't do both. They had to make a decision. And that decision's what matters. The decision of deception. They chose deception. And that matters. And the fact that people think it doesn't matter drives me crazy. It matters. The fact that people think it doesn't matter is beyond me. It matters. When people go behind closed doors and they choose to deceive you and they take your money and they lie to you, that matters. I don't know how else to explain it to you. It matters. When people choose to deceive you, it matters. When people steal your money from you under false pretenses, that matters. What else do you need to know? Oh man, 4 out of 5 people had televisions. Or I'm sorry, 1 in 5 people had televisions. 80% of people didn't even have a TV. And you think we went to the moon? Oh man, I'm a long way from done with this. I'm a long way from done. So yeah, the decision of deception. They chose to lie. And when you choose to lie, you can't fund a lie and fund reality at the same time. You can't afford to do it. You don't have time to do it. You don't have the resources to do it. You either make it or you fake it. And they faked it. And they've been faking it because that's all they know how to do now. They don't know how to make it. But along the way, they figured out that they can't make it. That's the problem they're dealing with now. Van Allen radiation belts. Look them up. Van Allen radiation belts. You can't get through them. It's humanly impossible. They made a decision to lie to you. That should bother you. It should bother you.